So we are live. Welcome everybody. This is a Let Us Game panel titled Gaming as Other. This is a group of people that have been doing this at Indie Plus before now, and so I saw it and I figured let's throw a panel into LUG Con here. So we have some special guests with us today that we're very excited to talk with, and I'm just going to kind of introduce us, and then I'm going to let Strix take over as the moderator. So on my left, probably not your left, I have Ajit. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Ajit George, and in my full-time job, I am Director of Operations for a nonprofit, an international nonprofit. In the gaming community, I am a LARP organizer, a tabletop enthusiast. I'll be writing the city guide for Bangalore for the Urban Shadows, and I think the main thing that I've really been focused on in the gaming community is advocacy and awareness and action about issues of race and gaming. And so I'm really glad to be here, Trey. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And we have our moderator today, Strix. She's going to ask all the important questions. If you go ahead and introduce yourself to the crowd.
Sure, Trey. So my name is Diaz Beltran. Nice to see you all. Thank you for joining us. I am a PhD student and academic, and I study sort of the crossover between mythology and games. But I've also been a gamer for a really, really long time. I've been doing LARP and tabletop for more than a decade now. I'm also part of the Gaming as Other collective, so I'm very interested in bringing diversity and inclusivity to the gaming culture. Recently, this is kind of new, I've been doing actually a lot of design work, which I never thought I would be doing, but here I am. So I'm also writing a city guide for Urban Shadows. I'm going to be covering Los Angeles, and then I'm doing several other projects as well. So really excited to be here today, Trey.
Well, we're happy to have you. You know, we're not high profile, so I feel like we're starting to get some high profile people, so this is very excellent. I am Trey, the LUG Con organizer, so I've been putting this on for a little bit over a year. We started out as a quarterly convention in 2013, and now we're going to slightly less quarterly, so kind of random dates here and there, but more than once a year because it's the internet. So our ideas are just open source gaming. We want everybody to just like pitch in where they can and enjoy the heck out of gaming. So this is going to be a slightly educational panel, hopefully, for everybody, and I'll let Strix kick it off.
All right, so today we're mainly going to be focusing on our experiences at the gaming table and how gaming looks through our eyes. All three of us here are members of at least one kind of minority, if not several. And so we don't have, you know, the status quo perception that maybe a lot of people do. And so we'd like to take the opportunity today to give you kind of like an inside track on what we see and what we think about when we sit down at the table and we play games. So I'm going to pose a question to the panel. And the first question is, when you are at an RPG session, how do your play style change depending on the race makeup of the group, or does it change at all? Do you notice anything about what you do or how you think depending on who is at the table? And Trey, I want to go ahead and start with you.
Well, I'd say it definitely like changes a little, but that's gotten less so with age. So when I was younger, I was a lot more inconsiderate, and so there would be these kind of you know, just not very respectful things that would come out of my mouth. But as I've gotten older and understand how people can be affected by just the things you say, even when you're not doing it in real life, you're doing it more in a gaming, in-character kind of perspective, I try and be respectful of who's around us. So yeah, you know, I have to say I'm human, and so things do change a little, but not a lot. And also being a minority, even like extra sensitive, so I try and just be nice and respectful as I can. But what I'll notice, like, is if we're playing with somebody that's gay, you know, and then something comes up like 2 men in the shower, you know, 2 ladies under the covers or something like that, the whole temperament changes of the table. I've had that definitely happen around me, and so it's kind of interesting how things aren't always the same. It really kind of depends on who's at the table with me, but I will change a little bit depending on what's happening.
Sure. I'm also prone to changing, and I think it's also evolved over time for me. Um, as a kid, when I approached the gaming table, I mostly just wanted to assimilate. Most of the other players were white, almost always all white, and so I didn't really think about it too much. I just jumped in and played white always in terms of characters, and I think as I grew older, I started to be a little bit more aware of the character choices I made, but also depending on who was at the table, uh, I think the racial makeup would sometimes make me feel less or more comfortable, depending on whether I felt that they maybe had a greater awareness or understanding for my background, or at least some sensitivity for my background. Um, like Trey, I also had some growing to do as well in terms of my own attitudes, and that had to do with certainly maybe a little bit of sexism on my part, and maybe lack of awareness for queer content and how that might impact. At the table, like a bunch of teenage kids, and like they'll make homophobic jokes, and you don't realize what you're doing, and you don't realize why that's wrong until you get some experience and I think engagement with people that are different from yourself, and I think that's actually why it's so important to have a diverse gaming table and a diverse gaming community, so that we gain that awareness and that wisdom.
And I kind of thought of like a little addendum too. Is I've played with games where it's all minorities, just all blacks. In high school, I had that because we were inner city, and so I got all my friends into Shadowrun. And then I played as the only black person in 90% of the rest of the games I've played my entire life. And it's kind of interesting to see those two races at the table really do act similar. I always get upset when people are like, oh, you should act more black. It's like, really? What did that even mean? But it's one of those where when I've seen my entire black group, they don't act like the white people will try and make them act. So it's kind of interesting. Everybody, whatever you are, you still play the same. You're still trying to kill that dragon. You're still trying to collect the gold. You're still trying to backstab as a thief. So just put that in there. I've seen both sides, and it's interesting how they're the same.
Awesome. So for myself, it's been quite a journey. In the beginning, when I was a teenager, I pretty much did whatever I could to fit in. Whatever was the norm at the table, then I just immediately adapted to that. So if people were telling crass sexist jokes, I was like right there with them, like doing the same thing. Obviously, I have grown since then, and I now realize that is not a super great idea. And that no matter the makeup of the table, I am who I am, and I have a right to be that person, and not have to bend to basically the status quo. I've never been at a table where everyone is the same racial makeup as me, ever. Not in my life. It's been majority white people, with sometimes Hispanic people or people of other races mixed in, but they're still generally the minority. What I find is that there's usually subtle changes that go on, depending on basically who has the biggest number of people represented. So if it's majority white people, they feel maybe like they kind of are able to get away with like maybe jokes that aren't okay, or like behavior in-game. I know especially as a woman, I often get pushed into sexualized in-game content if I'm the only woman at the table. If there are other women at the table, it's much, much less likely to happen because suddenly these people are being held accountable by other voices other than mine. So I think on that note, like diversity is really important because it holds people accountable to making everyone comfortable, not just themselves comfortable. And so I don't know. I think that this is a really good idea to make your gaming groups as diverse as you can.
Yeah, I would just want to jump on that and say that I think the gaming community, we use the term gaming community largely, and then actually there's definitely huge subsets, very, very different groups of gamers. And I would say some subsets have engaged thought more deeply about social awareness and social activism. you know, the really approached the differences between between us and thought about it heavily, and in doing so, they are a little bit more aware of how I am at the table. If I'm the only minority at the table, they may be a little bit less likely to do something offensive. But I've certainly been at times where lived in really predominantly white neighborhoods and areas, and I was always the outsider, and they just didn't have any frame of reference. So when we gamed, I would say like racial jokes would come into the fore fairly often, and not about Indians, but maybe about Black people or Hispanic people, and this seemed to be okay, like at the table. And I was always uncomfortable at the table, but didn't have a voice to speak up. I felt like if I said something, I was the one minority already there, so what do I do? How do I respond? And so conversations, diversity, awareness, understanding, everything really helps in engaging as a minority at the table.
Thank you, Ajit. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next question now. And the next question that I want to pose to you guys is, how do you feel when gaming with people that are not like you? And you can define like however you want, but obviously this is going to be very different from a minority perspective than from a majority perspective. So from your minority perspective, what is this like for you? And I think this time we'll go ahead and start off with Ajit.
Sure. I don't think, like you, I've ever felt like I was in the majority. Certainly there's never been a table of all Indian gamers. I don't think I've ever been at a table where it's all been all minority players or majority minority players. So, you know, I think coming at it, I've always felt a little bit uncertain or unsure of my footing at times. I've adjusted, adapted. I think at a younger age, I adapted pretty quickly. You know, you don't think about it, you just let it go. I was reading on Google Plus earlier today, in fact, somebody was saying that they came from the Philippines. They jumped into a game, the first game they ever played, and they played a half-elf. And they played a half-elf, and they were kind of sorting it out in their head about this teenage experience they had. They played this half-elf, and they said probably the majority of the reason was they were kind of like they thought all these little bonuses the half-elf got was really cool. And then they said a small part of it was maybe they felt also the half-elf kind of spoke to their, you know, their background a little bit outside of the norm. And that's probably my experiences as a teen. Like, I didn't think about being a minority at the table as a teen. Like, I just didn't consciously think about it. But it was something that I think as you grow older, you grow an awareness that we often do it to ourselves, leave our identity at the table or at the door when we enter gaming. So as an adult now, I've gotten a little bit better with being the minority at the table. It's challenging, but it depends on the atmosphere and the climate. I have to say, it's really case by case. There's sometimes I'll walk into a con and I'll think, man, this is going to not be the greatest experience. I don't know how people will act. And the other times I'll be like, oh, these are my people. Even if I'm the minority, like I know these people and I'll feel comfortable with them. So yeah, that's a really complex answer, but it's a complex question. I think it really determines on the people involved.
Yeah, to pick up on that one, definitely, it's kind of interesting. I was thinking as you were talking, I usually avoid playing the black role. You know, I toss Ebonics out, and it's like I make a point not to like go to that lowest, even though you can get the easy laughs. I mean, oh, God forbid, if you play into all the racial stereotypes, you'll get the easy laugh from the group as a minority. But that's something that I purposely avoid when I play as a minority at a table, because I always feel like I'm representing, you know, people's perspective of other black people, so I don't want to do that kind of thing. But it is interesting how when you're playing with a group of people that aren't like you, and say you just want to win, you know, gosh, what is it? Now I can't think of the name of that card game, Cards Against Humanity. I mean, that's one of them. God forbid if I throw in the racial thing, if I throw it in, then all of a sudden it is hilarity. You know, but then if the majority throws it in, not as funny, or everybody looks at to me before they laugh. So it's kind of interesting to be, even though it's not like anybody said, oh, hey, Trey, you're the black person. We're going to look to you every time some kind of minority joke comes up. It's like instinct to just look at you and try and get this okay. Like, is it all right? So with my friends and everything that I know, it goes back to Ajit's reference. It depends on who's at the table. Just because they're the majority or different than you, do you know them? Do you not know them? That kind of thing. So I don't play the lowest common denominator as best as possible. And then another is I assess the people that I'm sitting with. Like, if people have like offensive stuff, like I hate the Confederate flag. That is completely offensive to me. I'm sorry to say hate, but you know, it just really, really bugs me. It's one of those symbolisms. I grew up in the South, Southeast and stuff like that, and so it always hurts me. And so people will wear it. I've even seen people with tattoos. That's usually a table I'm going to get away from. And so I really do assess who's at the table before I even sit down. It makes a big difference. Another thing, though, I've actually tried to put in minority reactions into my character. So when you brought up the half-elf, I've done that before. It's like, what does it feel like to be a bastard and put that, or half-elf, and put that into my character and not try and be overt with it, but very covert. It usually doesn't get picked up you know, consciously by people, but it's helped me kind of play a character like, oh, you know, because I'm shunned, I'll go in the side door or something like that as I'm playing D&D, that kind of thing. So it helps and hurts the game, I'll say.
So something that you said, Trey, I found really fascinating, in that the groups almost automatically make you the arbiter of all racial content. And that must be like really hard to deal with, because sometimes, right, like you don't know what is going to be cool and what's not, and you all of a sudden have all of this responsibility just because you're black. I really feel for you there, because I've experienced the same thing. I have also played the half elf or half drow or half whatever. In real life, I am mixed race. I'm Mexican American, and so for me, it's kind of me pointing out like, hey, like this is the thing. It is me, but not really me, and it's here. But what do you think about that in a safe way? Because it's a game, right? And you don't get to judge me, but it's judging me because it's a way to work out personality issues, I guess. But one of the things that I've heard from both of you that I would like to reemphasize is that as minorities, we are constantly on our toes and reading the people that we are supposed to game with. And for me, sometimes it's like, you know, being in a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. You're like, no, when is my tail gonna get squished? And it's maybe not something that a lot of other people have to consider, in that we have to know going into a situation if we're gonna be okay or not. And if not, we either gotta pull out or we gotta deal with it. And this is very much in the forefront of our minds when we sit at a gaming table. I know, I mean, very recently, like this last year, I picked the wrong kind of game to play for myself as a woman. And I sat down at this game, and I was like, this is going to be fun. I'm at a con, this is a safe place, I like this con. And it was awful. I had a really, really bad time. And it was because of some of the sexist things that were going on that were not like specific in front of your face. They were like low-level things that were just really uncomfortable and very upsetting. And so I picked wrong, right? That's the consequence for minorities when they constantly have to sort of pick out the territories where they're safe. If they get it wrong, they're the ones who end up paying for it, not anyone else. And I'm not sure if that's a perspective that's widely known or understood. So I know that like when I get cagey about it, people are like, "What's your deal?" I'm like, "Well, you know, there's real things going on here, and I will really have to pay in some way if I don't get it right." So when that question about how do you feel about gaming with people who are not like you, I'm like, well, every time I have to decide what's going on with them. So a very interesting question to me. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add.
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, off of that and off of something that Trey said, where people look to him, you know, if he makes a racist joke, or he uses, you know, in Cards of Humanity, he pulls the race card and he plays it off, everyone's laughing. You know, there's a little bit of uncomfortable with that, right? There's a level of like, are they laughing at me? Are they really okay with this because now because I've been in the same situation as Trey in that respect. Um, if I'm making fun of Indians, it's certainly really funny if I start, joking about stereotypes about Indians. And like, why is that funny? Are they laughing at me making fun of my own people? These are tough questions when it comes to gaming and how you play yourself at a table. So I will always play, or I will predominantly play Indian characters. And this is a really conscious decision that came over years and years of like coming to grips with myself, coming to grips with my identity, and wanting to present that identity in new and interesting, varied ways at the gaming table, and have people also embrace it, accept it, and say this is the norm, and so this is the norm, and Hispanic is the norm, and Black is the norm, and Indian's the norm, and we all come to game, and our characters should all be these things too, not simply white. So, I think one of the challenges as we talk as a group, it's been really interesting in this short conversation, is that I think a lot of minority players come to the table with sometimes they're on guard, like you are, Strix, but sometimes they're just like not thinking about it at all. They I've heard it so many times before from minority players. They're like, I want to leave my race at the door. Like, I don't want to have to talk about it, think about it, deal with it. I just want to be like, I want to play games and not worry about it. And that is often the majority message too. Let's just play games and let's not think about race. But like, what does that mean? What's the actual coded subtext? The coded subtext is, let's play games as the majority, as the white, as the norm. Like, can you imagine suddenly Gen Con got taken over by 50,000 Indian Americans of Hindu origin? But they're all Americans, right? They're all Americans, but they're Indian and they're Hindu. If you were a minority, if you're white and you came to that Gen Con, would you still say it's an American Gen Con? What happens to the cultural context of D&D? What happens to the cultural context of playing White Wolf? Like, or indie games, suddenly religious aspects come into play, or Indian cultural context come into play, but we're still all American, but from a different context. And I think about, like, minorities are sort of asked to submerge themselves, which is very different from the overt sexism I think that women deal with. And so minority issues are often interestingly challenging because they're a little bit more subtle. The racism isn't necessarily right always in your face. You have to think about who your own identity is and how do you claim that identity at the table, and how do you say, like, I want to speak to some of my own background. Like, Trey comes from the South, and he has friends from the city, and these are all different backgrounds, and so on and so forth. You're biracial Mexican American. There's stories to be told there. So, anyway, I think there's a lot of interesting questions, and we're just kind of scraping the surface of it.
For sure, thank you.
I did have one thing
go ahead.
to add to. I kind of forgot. Every time I pick a character, because I heard you guys say that, and there is that subtext of, sorry, you kind of default to being the majority. Really early on, I just kind of defaulted to assuming everybody thought I was a black guy. Like, whatever D&D character it was, because I wouldn't even fill in the race part, because in old D&D, 2nd edition, they'd have the spot where you'd put in, like, your skin color and your height and this and that. And I stopped filling it in because I was like, they're all, no, I'm just the black person. And so I've always acted that way, and I think maybe other people probably assumed I was playing the white person because I didn't go to the Ebonics thing, and so they probably just assumed. But in my mind, it was always like, when my character would explain, oh, she's got, silky white skin or not so milky white skin, okay, great, this is going to be a great mix, and they're like, oh, you're playing a black guy the whole time? Or, I don't know, it's kind of weird. I just started assuming anytime I play an RPG, unless I'm an alien, that I'm a ball black guy there.
That's a really great insight from both of you. Thank you. So we're running a little low on time here. I'm going to ask the final question, and try to keep it a little shorter if you can, because we have about 5 minutes. What is the most memorable RPG experience that you had that only happened because a minority, either racially or sexually or LGBT, was at the session? And I'll give you a moment to think about that, and whoever wants to chime in first can do so.
All right, I thought about this one ahead of time. A friend of mine, really awesome friend, we game every week, D&D. he had brought up something racial in a game. Memory kind of fades a little bit. It's more his reaction to that that really gets me. Is I think slavery had come up in D&D, and it wasn't like a kobold thing. It was actually like, you know, this pirate captain had a black slave, you know, more kind of situation. And after the game, my white friend comes to me and he says, I hope you weren't insulted. And I didn't, there was no outburst. We played the game, got the experience, all that kind of stuff. But he brought it up later and he's like, you know, I can change how the game is or whatever. And it's like, wow, that's interesting that you even thought about it that way, because I just played through the scene. And for him, it was very much like, I want to keep you, Trey, as a friend. I don't want this to come between us as a friend. So that really kind of like brought it to me in a very extreme way. Like, and we're cool. There was no problems with that or anything like that. But yeah, it's not all game sometimes.
For me, it was a LARP where a good friend of mine sort of came out. He used the term heteroflexible for a while, but he finally came out and said he was queer, and that was just like he was like, I'm queer, like I'm not gonna like tiptoe around it, like I'm queer, I'm embracing it. And he did a couple of ritual things along with it, including painting his nails, and I think maybe for him is a visible sign of accepting himself and a visible sign to the world that he was queer. And watching him play in this LARP, because he was cross-playing as a woman, was pretty powerful, especially at the same time where I was embracing a character that was the first time I'd ever played in a LARP, an Indian character. So, like, for me, I'm playing to my own background a character that reminds me of my own heritage, which is super powerful for me. But simultaneously, I'm watching a good friend of mine come out as queer, play a female character that was very close to, I think, a lot of his own background and baggage. And it was wonderful. It was really moving to watch him play that character, because he owned himself and his identity in a way that I feel I wish all of us who are in the minority in some way, whether we are queer, you know, people of color, women at the gaming table, which are often a minority. I just love the fact that he owned it, and he came in to express himself, and I think we were all richer for that experience. So that was a fantastic moment for me.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So my memory is from one of the runs that I did of Shoshana Keswick's Service, which is about being conscripted into the military in World War III. And everyone is conscripted no matter what they have going on. So there was a woman who was older than me, and she was a mother. And the first part of the game, she played very straight, a certain way. But then in the game, something that happens is that you're informed that, like, America itself, right, the land territory is being attacked, and that puts your immediate family and everyone around you in danger. It's not just some overseas imaginary thing. And she flipped her character over, and it was extremely emotional, because she was like, you know what? Screw this. Like, I'm joining up. I'm protecting my children. Like, there's no freaking way that I'm going to let this happen. And it was coming from a place inside her that was very much the mother, right? You don't get the mother in regular LARPs about military service, if there is such a thing as regular LARPs about military service. But it was because of her unique perspective as a woman, and as a woman with children, that we got such an emotional play in this game. And this play, like, affected everyone. Like, she started crying, and other people started crying, and I started crying, and I don't cry. And so it was a really great experience, and I think the depth of what she brought was really, really valuable. And so we should not underestimate or dismiss what including everyone of all types of life in our games can do.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Well,
all right, but on that note, guys, we are out of time. So I'm going to hand moderation back over to you, Trey, and you can maybe do some closing remarks so we can get out of here.
Perfect. Well, I thank everybody for coming today. One of the things that is definitely enforced on Gaming as Other is the fact of keeping these short. It's not to really attack anybody, it's just to spread communication about a different perspective. So we only kept it to about a half hour on purpose. These are topics that can go much longer and more in depth. As some of the people know in the chat on Wednesday, that Lloyd was in with me and some other folks. So if anybody wants to say goodbye or announce something that our audience should maybe look forward to in the future, I'll start with Ajit.
Yeah, Gaming as Other, we've sort of curating articles and videos of panels that we do at both the cons. Hopefully, eventually, we'll have a couple of our panels from Gen Con up. But we have a lot of panels from different cons and from Indie Plus. I urge you to go check it out. Strix can give you the details as to where you can find it, but it's off of Strixworks. And just reach out to us if you're interested, if you want to help, if you want to become involved, if you have something to do, just join in, be part of the effort.
Excellent. And Strix, thank you for moderating today. That really took a load off of me to really kind of get into these questions. So I asked you the same thing, if there's anything we should look forward to or you want the viewers to know.
Sure. So Ajit was giving me those looks because I'm the one in charge of editing the Gen Con videos. So thank you for that. Like he was saying, I do try to curate a variety of different materials associated with the Gaming as Other movement and brand. They do not all belong to me. They're just different places on the web where people who have been working on this talk about or do various things. And those resources can be found on my personal website. I've sectioned off a section of it just for Gaming as Other. And my website is strixworks.com. And works is spelled with an E, so it's strixwerks.com. You can also email me. I have a contact page on my website. I love working with people in the community, really providing resources to people who need them, and making contact with those who maybe would like to do something but don't really know what the next step forward is. So that would be really great.
So with that said, I did want to make a clarification. If nobody picked it up, other is not just racial. So just remember, if anybody, it was said before in an old Gaming as Other, if anybody is offended, whatever their minority is, it's from their perspective, never from the person trying to do it or saying whatever. So other can be anything. But thank you so much for your time today, everybody. And we're going to wrap it up there. So go enjoy the rest of the convention and have a good weekend.